We are taught from an early age that friendships define us, that the people around us reflect our worth, our happiness, our success. The movies we watch, the books we read, the stories we tell, they all reinforce the same idea. To be alone is to be incomplete. And yet, there are those who walk a different path. Women who stand without a circle, who move through life without the constant presence of companionship. And the question is, why? Why does it make us uncomfortable to see someone with no friends? Why do we assume that friendship is the only measure of connection, of fulfillment, of meaning? We don't ask why someone has too many friends, but we always ask why someone has none. We don't question the noise of social circles, yet we hesitate in the presence of quiet. But maybe the real question isn't why she has no friends. Maybe the real question is, why do we assume she should? Because loneliness is not the same as solitude. One is forced, the other is chosen. One feels like emptiness, the other feels like freedom. And yet, the world refuses to see the difference. We equate being alone with being abandoned, being friendless with being forgotten. But what if a woman with no friends is not lonely at all? What if she has simply found something that most people spend their lives searching for? Contentment in her own company. There is strength in standing alone. In a world that pushes for connection at all costs, it takes courage to say, I am enough. It takes a rare kind of confidence to step away from forced friendships, from shallow conversations, from relationships that exist for the sake of existing. And yet, when a woman does this, when she chooses solitude over compromise, people don't see her strength. They see a problem to be fixed, a puzzle to be solved, a story that must have a tragic ending. But what if the story is different? What if instead of missing out, she is simply living on her own terms? What if instead of longing for something more, she has found everything she needs within herself? Because connection comes in many forms. Some find it in friendships, some find it in love, some find it in art, in nature, in moments of quiet that speak louder than words ever could. And just because her connection looks different doesn't mean it isn't real. Society tells us that we need friends to be happy, that we need a group, a circle, a tribe to belong. But what if belonging doesn't come from being surrounded, but from being understood? And what if the first person we need to be understood by is ourselves? Because if a woman has found peace in her own presence, if she has learned to live without seeking validation from others, if she has chosen to embrace the space that others fear, then maybe she isn't lacking anything at all. Maybe she has simply let go of what she never needed in the first place. But the world will always ask why. It will always wonder, always assume, always try to fit her into a mold that she has no interest in filling. And that's because society doesn't understand what it cannot categorize. It doesn't know what to do with a woman who isn't searching, who isn't waiting, who isn't hoping for something different than what she already has. And when people don't understand, they label, they judge, they whisper, but they never stop to ask the most important question of all. Because the real question isn't why she has no friends. The real question is, why does that make everyone else so uncomfortable? There is a difference between being alone and feeling alone. One is a physical state, the other is an emotional weight. But somewhere along the way, we started treating them as the same thing. We started believing that if someone stands apart, they must be missing something. That if a woman has no friends, she must be lonely. But what if that isn't true? What if she isn't searching for company, isn't longing for connection, isn't waiting to be invited into a circle she has no interest in joining? Because loneliness is not about the absence of people, it's about the absence of meaning. Some are surrounded by friends and still feel isolated. Others have no one and feel completely whole. The difference isn't in the number of relationships, but in the depth of contentment. And yet, when we see someone alone, we assume they are suffering. We assume they must be longing for something more. But what if the reality is that they have already found what they need? We live in a world that measures success by relationships, social media, gatherings, the endless need to be seen, to be liked, to be included. And for many, that is fulfilling, but for others, it feels exhausting. Not because they are incapable of connection, but because they have discovered that solitude is not a punishment, It is a space where clarity is found, where peace is nurtured, where self-awareness grows. And that kind of space is not empty, it is full. But people don't understand choice when it goes against expectation. When a woman chooses to be without friends, the world assumes she has been left out, that she has been overlooked, rejected, pushed aside, because the idea that someone could willingly step away from the noise, from the obligations, from the constant need to maintain relationships, that doesn't fit the narrative we've been given. We are taught to chase belonging, to seek out groups, to build circles. But what if some find belonging within themselves? Because the truth is, solitude is not a sign of failure. It is not a reflection of weakness or rejection or lack. It is a choice, and like all choices, it is not for everyone. Some thrive in community, in conversation, in the presence of others. But some find their strength in the quiet, in walking alone, not because they must, but because they want to. And that kind of decision is not sad, it is powerful. Yet the world will always question it. It will always assume that solitude is a phase, that eventually everyone must crave friendship, must seek companionship, must find their place in a group. But what if some are already exactly where they need to be? What if their path is not meant to be shared? What if instead of waiting for people to fill the space around them, they have chosen to embrace the space within them? Because loneliness is not about how many people are present, it is about how understood a person feels. And sometimes the greatest understanding comes not from others, but from within. Sometimes being alone is not a void, but a sanctuary. And if a woman has found that within herself, if she has learned to be whole without needing others to complete her, then maybe she isn't lonely at all. Maybe she is simply free. But freedom is often misunderstood. People fear what they cannot explain, and they question what does not follow the pattern. And so they will continue to ask, continue to wonder, continue to assume. But the question is not whether she is lonely. The question is, why do we struggle to accept that she might have simply chosen something different? From the moment we are born, the world starts telling us who we should be. It tells us how to act, what to want, what success looks like. And among the long list of expectations, one message is repeated over and over. You must belong. You must surround yourself with people, build friendships, create a circle that defines who you are. Because to be alone, to stand apart, to choose solitude over social connection, that goes against everything we've been taught. But what happens when someone doesn't fit that mold? When a woman decides that friendships are not a necessity, that solitude is not a burden, that she would rather walk alone than force relationships that don't align with who she is. The world doesn't know what to do with her. It assumes something is wrong. It labels her as lonely, broken, missing out. Because in a society built on connection, choosing a different path is seen as rebellion, not as a decision made from strength. Expectations shape the way we see others, but they also shape the way we see ourselves. A woman with no friends is not just questioned by the world, she is pressured to question herself, to wonder if she should change, if she should try harder, if she should force connections just to silence the voices that tell her she is incomplete. But what if she isn't incomplete at all? What if the expectations placed upon her are not truths, but limitation? Because not every life follows the same blueprint. Some are meant to be surrounded, and others are meant to be still. Some thrive in groups, and others thrive in solitude. And yet, we measure worth by the same standard. The more people in your life, the better. The more invitations, the more friendships, the more proof that you are wanted. But what if the need for proof is the real problem? What if fulfillment is not found in how many people know you, but in how well you know yourself? The weight of expectation is heavy. It convinces people to chase things they don't truly want, to shape their lives around appearances rather than authenticity. It pushes them to seek validation in numbers instead of depth. And for a woman with no friends, that weight comes in the form of whispers, of assumptions, of the unspoken belief that her life would be better if she just tried to fit in. But what if she has already let go of the need to fit at all? Because the most powerful decision a person can make is to live on their own terms, to stop measuring life by someone else's standards, to stop believing that worth is found in being surrounded. A woman with no friends has not necessarily lost anything. She may have freed herself from expectations that were never hers to begin with. And yet, the world will continue to question her, to wonder, to assume, to suggest that she must be searching for something more. But what if she has already found it? What if, instead of missing out, she is fully present? What if, instead of longing for companionship, she has embraced a deeper form of connection, one that is not dependent on others, but on her own sense of purpose? Because expectations tell us what life should look like, but they don't tell us what life should feel like. And if she has chosen a life that feels right, that brings peace, that allows her to be fully herself, then maybe the expectations were wrong all along. And yet people will continue to ask, continue to assume, continue to insist that she must want something different. But maybe the real question isn't whether she is missing something. Maybe the real question is why we are so afraid to let go of the expectations that tell us we must always belong to someone else. There is a kind of power in being alone, but the world doesn't always recognize it. We are taught that strength is found in numbers, that support comes from the people around us, that being surrounded means being secure. But what if strength is not about who stands beside you, but about who you become when no one else is there? What if solitude is not a weakness to be pitied, but a foundation to be built upon? Because solitude is not just an absence of people, it is a presence of self. It is the space where reflection happens, where clarity is found, where a person learns to stand without leaning. And yet when a woman chooses solitude, the world assumes she is lonely. It assumes she is searching, struggling, waiting for something to change. But what if she is not waiting at all? What if she has already found something deeper than what most people spend their lives chasing? There is a strength that comes from learning to sit with yourself, to face your thoughts, to embrace your own company, to stand without needing validation or approval. It is in these quiet moments that a person truly understands who they are. Because when there is no one to impress, no one to perform for, no one to meet expectations for, all that remains is authenticity. And a woman who has discovered this within herself does not need the world to understand her choice. She simply needs to live it. But the world resists what it does not understand. It tells us that to be alone is to be lacking, that solitude is something to escape rather than something to embrace. And so a woman who walks alone is questioned, not because she is lost, but because others do not know how to measure a life that isn't defined by social connection. They wonder if she is happy, if she regrets her choices, if she will one day wish she had taken a different path. But what if she already knows the answer? Because solitude builds resilience. It teaches patience, it strengthens the mind, it creates a foundation that is unshaken by the opinions of others. It does not mean a person is incapable of relationships, but rather that they are not dependent on them. And that kind of independence is rare, that kind of self-sufficiency is powerful, that kind of peace is something that cannot be given by others, it must be built from within. Yet, people will always assume that solitude is temporary, that eventually everyone must return to the world, must seek out companionship, must find comfort in the presence of others. But what if some find comfort in the space where others hesitate to go? What if some discover that solitude is not a phase but a choice? What if instead of searching for connection, they have found a deeper connection within themselves? Because the strongest people are not always the loudest, the most surrounded, the most visible. Sometimes they are the ones who have learned to walk alone without fear. The ones who have faced themselves and found nothing missing. The ones who understand that solitude is not about isolation, it is about liberation. It is about knowing that who you are is enough, even when no one else is there to remind you. And the world will keep questioning, keep assuming, keep trying to fit solitude into a narrative that was never meant to contain it. But maybe the real question isn't why some people choose to be alone. Maybe the real question is why so many others fear the strength that comes from standing on their own.